The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame.
Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I'm Reagan Kelly, and I'm joined this week by all of my awesome co-hosts.
Laura Nash.
Nate Heininger.
And Shane Kelly. There's a perfect electronic chain from my voice to your ears. I think there's a powerful magic in that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes! And this week we are talking about Immortality again. We are talking spoilers. This is a spoiler cast of Immortality from Half Mermaid and director, creator Sam Barlow and squad. If you haven't listened to the previous week's episode, this one won't make sense. And in all honesty, if you haven't played Immortality, this episode is probably not the place to start.
If you haven't played like a couple hours of Immortality, this is probably not going to make sense.
Mm-hmm. We're going to be jumping right into pretty in-depth spoiler territory.
Ring the spoiler bell.
We don't normally do 2 episodes on games that we don't highly, highly recommend. So somehow you've made it do exactly right this moment. Go play the game, listen to episode 1, and then come back to here.
I'll say, folks, if you are about waist deep in water, this is a comfortable time for you. If you have completely hit credits, congratulations, you can listen to the episode. But if you're still mid-swimming, you haven't hit credits, you can still join for some of the party. But there will be a time when the party is no longer safe for you.
Yeah, we won't be able to have like I mean, first of all, we're already in total spoiler territory here, but like I won't have a, hey, here's where you jump off point, because this game is a soup of discoveries and you know where you are in it. And we can't tell you what is and is not a spoiler for you at any point. This is really an episode designed mostly for, we're going to be talking about things in an order that seems to make sense to us. Which is mostly going to be, we're going to start by talking about some of the hidden mechanics and talk about some of the initial discoveries that come after you discover those hidden mechanics. Then we're going to talk through the plots of the movies. This game is made up of 3 films, and we're going to talk through the films, what happens both in front of and behind the camera during the production of those films. And then we're going to talk endings and other stuff like that. So you'll know if you are trying to hop off at some point where you want to hop off. But just know that we may blurt something that's a surprise to you if you haven't completed the game. And you're going to have to live with that if you decided to listen to this episode before completing the game. I should also say, like, Shane and I have hit credits, and I played this game for about 16 hours at this point.
Ooh.
A little longer than
I have not seen everything in the game, but I've seen damn close. Shane, where were you at with it?
I don't know exactly number of hours, but I think we're probably on about the same page at this point. I know there's a couple of things that you have seen that I haven't, and probably vice versa. I have answers to most of the pressing questions in the game, and I definitely feel like I've had a kind of complete experience. But it's the nature of these Sam Barlow games that they're designed for you to kind of meander and miss things. And this, maybe more than any of the previous ones, is designed for you to miss certain things.
I expect this episode to be much like, any longtime listener will understand that this is likely to be another episode where Shane and Reagan and Laura tell me what actually happened in the game. Although Laura, I know me and Laura are more we're in the hand.
Laura, I was on vacation for the week, and honestly, like, there was a house with like 12 kids and 5 adults, and like, let's be honest,
perfect
this game isn't the right place. Like, that's not a suitable environment for this game. So I'm probably closer to 6 hours, which is way less than my other co-hosts, but I'm also aware of the dangerous waters that I'm swimming in.
And I split the difference between this group. I think I'm right around the corner from hitting credits, but I always am wrong about what I think is happening in Sam Barlow games. So I'm excited to hear what is actually happening in this game. So I guess let's dig in. Reagan, I think we have to set up some of the mechanics, right?
So this game tells you its core mechanics right up front, look through these clips, use the match cut feature to find new clips to watch them from usually the middle because you're jumping in. But as you begin exploring the films, you might notice some weird stuff start to happen. I actually maybe it'd be fun to talk about quickly. How did you guys discover the rewind mechanic and the scenes within a scene or clips within a clip?
Well, I mean, the soundtrack in this game, the sound design is really good, but the soundtrack, what's playing underneath, is pretty unobtrusive, like a blend of sort of classical music and a little bit of like detective, heart beating music a little bit, but for the most part, it just blends into the background until it very much does not, and you get you get a very obvious creepy sound, and your controller starts to shake.
Oh, cool!
And so,
I was doing keyboard, so
yeah. Oh man, I would have had a hard time without the keyboard,
same.
The controller, because a lot of the audio cues were sometimes
a lot
subtle.
quieter. The Steam Deck vibrated, and that ultimately ended up becoming even more of an indicator for me. But right out of the gates, they're like, okay, well, I have like two things I can do, which is go forward or go backwards. And now there's a ominous hum. So I bet I must have to go backwards here or something. And then, which is essentially what it is. There's some, I still don't truly understand what the difference between sometimes you have to like go frame by frame with the D-pad and like click over until you find exactly the frame that triggers the secret scene.
So I'm not sure that that's not a bug, because like when you use the analog stick or the triggers to move forward and backwards through a clip, it kind of has analog speed control. Whereas if you're using the arrow, the left and right on the D-pad, it's a fixed speed. And I think my theory is that if you get the speed just right with the analog control, then that'll activate it. But it's easier to get that speed at exactly the speed it's expecting in order to activate those clips when you use the arrows. But I'm not 100% sure on that.
I don't think I agree with that. I think there are several different kinds of interaction that they're using to load into these alternate scenes. They all do involve going backwards through the tape, but some of them are, I think, specifically meant to be easier to trigger than others. Like you asked at the start of this, like, how did you discover these at first? And I mean, for me, that was, the game is really designed like a nonlinear video editor. Mm-hmm. And so I was just using those shuttle keys as I'm very used to for any kind of video project. If you're rewinding in this game, you're going to start seeing those things. And I think it's just easy to see it and then rewind over it. You see it, when you're rewinding, you rewind again and again, and you think, okay, maybe there's a specific frame here. And then you start going frame by frame because they give you all of these controls, and that's when you start triggering it. If they made them too easy to trigger by just rewinding, then you would lose what I think is a really compelling period in your exploration of the game, which is the period where you know something is odd, but you're not constantly triggering the rewind scenes, the special hidden scenes.
I think it's speed dependent, because if you start going backwards at a certain speed, it's speed and time dependent, because you can go all the way back and miss things entirely. There's like a mid, but if you go slow enough and you hit the right spot, you will trigger some. But I think you need to do it around the time of the boom. Like it took me a while to know it was sound cued, because I didn't have the haptic feedback.
What happened for me was that I was early on. I was sticking to trying to watch video clips from Ambrosio, and Ambrosio. We'll talk about the plot of it in a bit, but it has a lot of scenes where people are speaking to the devil or trying to summon the devil. And in those scenes, they were speaking in a way that was like, that sounds like backwards speech. And it's a classic thing. Like, talking backwards is devil talk, right? So I was trying to hear what they were saying.
Employ that.
Right. So I was trying to hear those, and in several places, and that, first of all, is really brilliant because it's like a clue, right, to you that you should be trying to play video in reverse to hear the video, because everyone knows about playing a record backwards, right? And in fact, this would have been coming out at a time when people would have been talking about that, I think. And in some of those contexts, I never got it to activate. Initially, I didn't get it to activate an actual clip. It was just showing those ghost images. And I thought that was all that was happening. I thought I was just going to see ghost images at this point. I didn't realize that each of those ghost images, as far as I can tell, all of those ghost images, if you screw around with the speed enough, it will activate a clip.
You know, what's funny, Reagan, is I have played, again, a lot of hours of this game, and I don't think I've seen any of those them talking backwards scenes, but I have seen them talking to the devil. So I'm not, I didn't have that like learned experience.
Well, when you play it back, it says like Satan is Lord, he is mine.
Yeah.
Like you can hear it. But the funny thing is the first scene that I did the backwards to listen to the talk is happened to be a rehearsal scene. And there is not a hidden scene in that one. And then the second time when I was listening to the full version of the devil worship and I went backwards, that was the first time I clipped into the a secret scene. So it was actually a big surprise because the first time I thought it was just backwards talk. The second time I wanted to hear the backwards talk again and got a scene. So I think that might have been them.
I've wondered too, there's something about the secret scenes are usually either the secret characters who we'll talk about in a minute are in just sort of like a black box or a very dark environment. And then there are other ones where they are replacing characters in the scene. And I found that a lot of times those ones where they're replacing, it was just simply going backwards.
Yeah, those ones were easier to activate.
They were way easier to activate. It was the ones where they're like monologuing, often right down the barrel,
black
right?
And white. Like, I kind of interpreted that as like when you see those scenes where it is literally. So we'll talk in a moment about what is revealed by these clips, but the strange people that we encounter in these clips,
see-through dress, slick back hair
woman. The scenes where she is just in the space with the actors you were already seeing, usually replacing one of the characters. I interpreted that as like, this is the reality of what's happening in a sense. I mean, I think it is all, it's like, it's revealing a truer reality, right? Whereas the clips that are black and white, I just interpret it as these are the inner thoughts of this being. This is this person, this being, laying it out for you in a sort of an inner monologue that's not necessarily present in the moment of the scene.
That's what I thought at first, but I actually don't think so now.
Oh, well, I'd love to hear your interpretation if that makes sense to talk about now. But yeah.
When we're talking about this black and white thing, for the two people listening that might have taken a film class and been forced to watch it, it's very like Passion of Joan of Arc from like 1920s. It's very close up, very black and white, very like no hair, intense shots. It feels very personal and it feels very direct. I won't say more than that, but you will be able to tell the difference between the substitution scenes and the direct address ones if you haven't seen it before. If it's not Passion of Joan of Arc, it's The Seventh Seal. So it's Bergman-y, it's Scandinavian in all those secret scenes, as opposed to the ones where you're just like swapping in for the actors and the scene continues.
I didn't think about Seventh Seal when you mentioned that, and like, I'm not a film nerd to the degree where I'm like, deeply Bergman literate, but like this definitely, I could see that. That's a good, sweet ref.
Hey, didn't finish the game, but can provide the film references.
Yeah, but this is also like really this is a film nerd game. And so it would not surprise me at all if that was something that they were specifically.
I'm looking forward to in a week when I'm another 10 hours in this game being like, oh man, there's a secret reference to this movie. And just like sharing it in the Discord.
Yeah, I am looking forward to the 7-hour long video essays about this game, like really hardcore. But continuing on, we talked a little bit about the scenes within scenes and the rewind mechanic. A couple quick things I want to touch on before we start talking about what we discovered using that and the other tools this game puts at your disposal. One is that I had a really hard time activating some of these until Shane gave me the tip about using the arrow or D-pad in order to activate things. So if you're having trouble activating these, what worked most reliably for me most of the time was when you find that stretch of scene where there's the wah sound, I would play a little ways into it so I had a little bit of time to play with. Then I'd stop playback and then just hold the left D-pad arrow to do the rewind, and that almost always worked for me, whereas like playing around other ways was kind of a hit or miss.
Same thing.
And so that getting that tip early,
and then
on
I don't know about you guys, but then I immediately get confused because in the secret scenes the buttons are switched forwards, backwards, and forwards, which is of course a good dynamic. Yeah,
because you're playing the tape backwards,
but
essentially. And that also leads into the other thing that was like super confusing early on. This isn't super common, but there are scenes in this game where it places those scene within a scene within a scene. I don't think I remember it going more than 4 layers, but like if you get into one of those reverse scenes and then you hear that sound again, sometimes it just sort of means that like here's an off ramp to another clip. Sometimes it would mean like if you start into one of those scene within a scenes and then rewind, or actually in this case fast forward, and then get to the point where you came in again, you'll hear the sound again. But if you hear that sound again, if you continue playing the clip and you hear that sound again, maybe towards the end of the clip, try reversing the direction of the tape again, and occasionally there will be reverses.
Once you're into that situation, it becomes pretty easy. You're not going to have to really do the frame by frame within the scene.
But you do have to kind of expect or know that it's there, sort of not. Like, I think in a lot of cases, the times they used that as a gimmick, it was doing something really specific. Like going back through layers of the past kind of thing.
Yeah. There's a lot of scenes that are like that have really heavy importance to the meta narrative, that are where they are revealing a lot of information, or they are like something very plot relevant is happening. And like those are the scenes where they use that trick.
Or it's very clear in the dialogue that it's unfinished.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it wants you to finish it, and you have to figure out how. Like that was the way I found it the first time. Was there was like it's not, this wasn't the question, but it's like, what's in the box?
Well,
and it was like,
that leads me to a question that I have, and I think I want to ask now before we actually get into the nitty gritty. So there's all these crazy secret scenes. The game, the video is haunted or whatever, but the world of this game is that it's presented as like a box set collection that you now get to like.
I got a little more information on this, because it doesn't really put this straight up front and center, but like the meta narrative of this is intended to be that someone gave Sam Barlow and Half Mermaid a bunch of film, and they have released it as a piece of software. Emulating the old movie. They had a specific name for it, Movieola,
but they never went through it themselves, because like
it's not to say that they didn't necessarily.
They kept it intact,
but something compelled them to release it in this form. Is what I would say.
It seems to me if you figured out that there are, what's happening in this game, you'd make that more public than releasing a like an obscure.
Or would you, Nate? Or would you? We'll talk about some things towards the end that made me think like, that's an odd thing. Nope. Yeah. I get it now.
It's like the moment in Twin Peaks when you realize that half the town knew tons of secrets the whole time, and you're like, why were you not talking to each other?
They want to get it out, but they don't want to be like, oh, we purposefully. Okay. So that's helpful.
So here's what we start picking up on. The first thing that I saw when I saw one of these clips, just to give you a little taste, is the first one. I'm pretty sure the first one I saw was The Great War. Mm-hmm. You know that clip that you run into a zillion times because they link to it a bunch.
Same.
And it's basically this strange, eerie looking black and white video of a woman with slicked back hair and a strange flowing dress that barely conceals her shape. I'm just saying. And
there's a lot of nudity in this game.
A lot of nudity. But she's unsettling looking, right? Yes. Like there's something they cast a woman who's like able to achieve a level of like unhumanity.
Well, it's like really uncanny eerie. Valley level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, her and the other one are both very strange looking. And she's in the clip that I first encountered, she's monologuing about having woken up around the time of the last Great War, World War I, and I forget what all else is in that clip.
Influenza.
Influenza. She's talking about things that, would have been so far outside the time period that this game depicts that, it immediately clues you into like this
Oh,
person
title. Immortal.
is an immortal.
Oh, at this point, I thought, cool, I found another movie, secret movie, and I clicked on her face, and it just kept bringing me to Marissa.
Back to Marissa,
because mine, the first time I saw her, it replaced. It was a shot with Marissa laying in bed, looking straight at the camera, and then it swapped her out with this woman in the exact same position, in the exact same like everything, and so much so that I managed to get the frames like right next to each other where I could go Marissa, whatever this is, Marissa, whatever this is, back and forth, and being like, is this Marissa or is it not Marissa? Because I thought maybe they were doing in it like a, because I thought her head. Well, I thought her head was shaved because of the angle. I didn't see that she had like, so I thought maybe there was like a, all right, this is future shaved head, intense Marissa.
This is Marissa who's been through some shit.
I guess it depends on which show. I was playing with Ambrosio so much at the beginning that like the thought that wouldn't have.
I spent almost no time in the beginning of the game in Ambrosio, which I think is part of why I didn't have any of the reverse demonic stuff. I was in Minsky a lot, and I was eventually like, no, look at the shape of their nose. That cannot be Marissa, and then it. Yeah, totally. Well, I don't. Sometimes I think I'm face blind too.
But yeah, you don't know at that point. Yeah,
but again, you click on her face and it goes to Marissa, and you're like,
it's very, very confusing. So here's like, I don't. This is total spoiler cast. Yeah. So here we go. I think at this point, before we start talking about the plot of the movies, I have to lay out like what I think is going on with these immortals. And at this point, I played through this game.
Well, first off, calling them immortals is
right. Okay, I've dug through this a lot now. If you guys are okay with it, I'm just going to go ahead and lay out what I believe is the plot of Immortality as a whole.
Can we do it a little bit different? Laura, can you say what you think is happening, and then I'll say what I like this. What I think is
Please
happening.
Go ahead.
And
but I'm so much earlier in the game.
That's why it'll be. We can cut this if you don't want to do this, but like.
Well, I've already in the pre-talk been partly spoiled, but I'll tell you what my working theory was like before I played the last 3 hours in, because I wrote it down on a piece of paper and just revisited it. Because around the times I was getting the substitutions and I had seen 2 or 3 of the monologues, I was like, oh, this is a corrupt version of Marissa who lives in film now.
Nice.
Like in the future, this is a version of like Marissa can't be like, she gives this monologue that I found reasonably early that Shane referenced at the beginning about the light on the skin reaching people, and like that is a power and magic. So I assume that at some point, frustrated with the fact that none of her films are being released and more things weirdly happening, that she just became a creature of film.
She's relocated into the movie zone.
And she haunts her back catalog.
I like that. And also it's not actually that wrong.
Right. As an older, ageless version of herself, she lives by revisiting all her previous versions of herself caught on film and puts herself back in them and like comments on what she felt at the time. And like, that's how she lives. So she's like a film
goblin.
A succubus
wraith
is what a film wraith. I think I wrote film succubus down because of the sexuality, all of the sex stuff. So that that was a working theory of like, this is an ageless version of Marissa. And that also to me helped that's why I decided the war scene made sense, because it was around the birth of film. Mm-hmm. So it coincided with the birth of film as a medium. So I was like, now Marissa can go back to the beginning of film.
She lives in all film.
Because she lives in film.
I love this theory. It's also not that wrong in some of its interesting particulars.
But this is why I wrote it down, because I was like, I want to know what 3 hours in Laura thinks is happening.
Which is why I asked, because I think that's interesting. Yeah. Because Reagan,
where did you get with this, Nate?
So I love Laura's idea way better than mine, but I'm also like,
I've evolved mine since, but I liked that one better.
So my working theory was that like artistic muses actually exist in almost like a Greek sense, where it's like this sort of god thing that, you know, travels around and inspires people to create work. And these beings that we've seen are muses, but they're also like horrible demon creatures who, like, if for whatever reason you mess with their purpose, you get eaten.
Yeah, and I will say that part of the like Marissa in the thing is like there was a whole Ambrosia was the first thing I dealt in deep, and there's like selling your soul for what you want, and like devil and temptation. So I assume Marissa had to do
some
something
sort of
horrible
deal
to
with the
become a
devil.
film
Yeah,
creature.
the movie connections.
Yeah, the film is her phylactery.
Exactly.
I didn't. Yeah,
There's some autoclaves involved. I don't know what's gonna happen.
Horcruxes left.
Okay.
And right.
I like all of this stuff. So here's
I like all the stuff, but it's wrong.
Yeah. But it's wrong in cool ways. So here's where I ended up with it. And this is also to say, like, my read on this is informed by more time with the text, but also not necessarily authoritative.
Well, and we've got here Shane's rebuttal to whatever you think is happening too.
Yeah, Shane and you can.
Yeah. So here's the overall story that I think that the hidden scenes within this game are telling. There are creatures among us, not very many anymore, these two that we know about, that are immortal creatures that have lived since presumably the dawn of time. And they live among us. They take on human forms by basically eating people and taking on their form. And they do that in order to renew themselves. And they are a kind of like, I thought of them as like psychic vampires, but I also thought like, well, these guys, they're self-styled muses. Like Nate was saying,
you guys keep going back to muses. I never saw a shot. I don't think I saw a video where they referred to themselves as muses. So I'm not sure where you guys are picking that up.
I was thinking, I basically brought that to it. Maybe that was because I just watched The Sandman, which has a literal muse imprisoned.
No, I had the same thought though, Reagan, before any of us talked about any of this. There's something about the way the woman immortal talks about like trying to create or be a part of art or something like that.
So here's where that specifically came in for me, is that like they talk about there's two of them that are in this film, and we don't have names for either of them. So one of them was specifically referred to as the other one.
And
they're credited as the one and the other one.
Oh, they're credited. So okay, I knew one was the other one, which implied that the main one that we see the most of is the one. But whatever. So anyway, I believe that the one and the other, there was the thing that brought that muses thing in for me was that they talked several times about at one time in the past, they were working together to try to uplift humanity. And they did that by trying to inspire them through telling a great story. And the story that they're talking about was the Christ story, that one of them, probably the other one, was Christ. And the other one was one or both of the Mary figures in the Christ story.
So good.
And that they were trying to uplift humanity by creating this narrative, but that it failed, that the other one regarded that entire experience as a complete failure, and sort of gave up on humanity. The one, the female that we see throughout most of the game, didn't quite reach that level of giving up on humanity. These creatures hibernate sort of from time to time and skip long periods of human history by doing so.
They do so by dying. I loved that one had a monologue at one point where she said how she had just gotten good at it to the point where she could just lay down in a puddle of water and drown.
Yeah, or she can just choose. She said she used to have to drown herself, but now she's gotten good enough that she can just stop breathing at will and die, which is cool.
It's so tight how they can just lay and they can just die.
Cool.
Wish I could do that, right?
Best superpower ever.
And that her body just knows when to revive itself. And so we come to the present incarnation, which is that she revived herself at some time around between World War I and World War II, I think.
It's right at the end of World War. Or it's at the end of World War II, I think, because she's saying there's a whole part about how like people can be successful in dark times, but it's when things are thriving.
Well, that's true, but she also talks about the Great War and the influenza pandemic, which would have been
18.
What was it? 18? Yeah, 1918. So I think she came around. And we see this happen. If you look at, there's certain clips where you can see her essentially wake up in a cave as a black man. And then there's another clip where you can see that black man talking in French to Marissa Marcel and then biting her neck.
You see that?
Oh, wow.
You, if you haven't caught that, it's a pretty great scene, man. But I believe there was a incarnation of her before. I mean, there've been infinite incarnations of her before, but you also see one of the incarnation of her from before the black man, which was a very witchy looking woman that I've only seen in one clip. In any case, she at some point in the past, maybe World War I, maybe World War II, sometime around then, gets into the body of a provincial French girl named Marissa Marcel, and at this point, we don't know where the other one is, but she comes to she first becomes a model, then and stars in a soap commercial. Then she moves to America, or maybe moves to America, then stars in the soap commercial. She interviews or auditions rather for the movie Ambrosio and gets the part. Possibly by psychically abusing the director. There's some great scenes there where you can see her psychically abusing Fisher and humiliating him in ways that were incredibly satisfying.
No, he seems like a cool, normal dude. Why you gotta be mad at
fucking weird?
He doesn't have weird sexual hangups with his two leading ladies.
Yeah. And then, okay, so through the stories, very briefly, because we'll talk about them as we go through the movies. She plays, Marissa in Ambrosio, meets the cinematographer. They get together and have both an affair and an artistic collaboration where they begin making another movie, Minsky, together. But during that time, the other one returns.
So the other one was back during the plot of Ambrosio. I think you might have missed.
I might have missed that.
So the other one does appear on set. There are a few scenes in Ambrosio where Marissa's character, the monk, communicates directly with Satan. There's like a really great scene.
Oh, and the other one was Satan in those scenes.
Exactly. Yeah. So in those scenes, if you do a reverse, you get a scene between both
of them.
Yeah.
Nice.
The one and the other one replace both characters.
I don't know if I saw that and just didn't remember it or I've missed it, but
the first backward Satan, the non-rehearsal backward Satan scene where he gives the branch, they both get replaced in that one.
Okay. I think I did see that and forgot about it or something, but
not just that one. There's also a scene with the puppetry wings. Yeah, and there's a few other things. Basically, any place that character shows up, you've got a nice scene.
I think the reason that I wasn't thinking about it was I was thinking about it more in terms of like he wasn't interfering in the production of Ambrosio. He was sort of just there to see what she was up to.
He's helping a little bit.
Yeah. Whereas in Minsky, she and John
and the other actor who walks out because he can't stand the weirdo.
Yeah. She and John Durek are working together on Minsky, and they hire an actor, Carl Greenwood. And I believe during the production of that film, the other one kills and takes over Carl.
Poor
Greenwood.
Carl.
And that's why she's super upset about she's super upset about it right in the middle of the film. There's some scenes where there's some clips that are behind the scenes where she's really pissed about it.
That's one of the places where the layers I think are really cool because you have Marissa who is upset about Carl, but it's not really like those are scenes that you can really read in two different ways. Like I think she's saying stuff like, I forget what it was she said. There's like a short clip where she's like, it's not like him or something like that. And it's
I remember there's a scene where Durek is filming her and she's just looking upset and she just says, he's not who you think he is.
He's not who that's the one. Mm-hmm. He's not who you think he is.
And it's, you used to be all over him. What happened? Did something happen between you and Carl? He's not who you think he is. And finally that ends in Marissa, firing a loaded prop gun at Carl Greenwood, killing him. And, of course.
So before we move too far here, like the out of the context of the two immortals there, like this is where I feel like we really started to see the dysfunctional relationship that the two of them have.
Mhm.
Yeah, the sort of eternal struggle between them, sort of.
Yeah, I mean the fact that like she in the first film and really in the second film, like she's kind of pulled away from him to embrace this like artistic life that she's trying to create, right?
Mhm.
And he has followed her into this, even though he really despises humanity and doesn't conceal that. And there's a sort of abuse to that relationship, this sort of possessive, controlling element that I think is coming through there.
There's also a certain element of like perhaps protectiveness too, because in order to pursue this, she is pushing herself beyond her limits. These immortals have a certain sort of limit of like at some point they need to eat a person and change their form. And she is keeping the idea of Marissa alive too long. And we start seeing that mostly in Two of Everything.
I guess so a lot of this is news to me. So that would
Yes,
explain why she still seems so young, even though Two of Everything is 30 years basically after.
There's a really specific thing going on in Two of Everything. I have a lot to say about Two of Everything, but yes,
I think we'll loop back and talk about the specifics of each movie and probably can go into more depth then. But like, Shane, go ahead.
So yeah, I do want to loop back when we get to Two of Everything, but since we've addressed it now, no one, including like the about page that is written by Sam Barlow, addresses the fact that like decades go by and we have footage of Marissa Marcel in decades later, and she's clearly not aged a day.
No.
Right. And from the beginning, that is one of the like markers of weirdness here. And really, when we were talking earlier, like what was your original working theory? My original theory was, this is about a movie star vampire.
Right.
It's called Immortality. So you have to know why is it called Immortality is a question.
Right.
But it's also it's a real good title
absolutely.
though, just real quick, because my initial thought was, it's Immortality. We now will remember Marissa Marcel forever because she is. Yeah,
Yes.
Exactly.
It's
it's a
layered.
good name.
Exactly. But even from the description that you can get to before hitting start, clearly something is wrong because Marissa should be much older.
Yes.
Anyway, what we will later see, I guess I'll talk more about this when we get to it, is that Marissa is no longer the one at that point. Marissa is a kind of a projection of the one.
Right, because we see her eat John
Yes.
at some point during the production of Minsky.
Which was the second clip I saw. The second
What?
secret clip I saw was
That's wild to me.
her eating John, because he's like, I made this movie for you. Why? And then she eats him.
Yeah, my read on that scene was like if you watch this sort of hidden scene, you see her and him talking about like I made this for you. She says like, this isn't the I revealed myself to you. This isn't the reaction I wanted. And he says, I don't know what you are, or something like that. I got the feeling from that clip that she had on some level revealed to him that she wasn't a normal human like she thought, like that she revealed something about her true nature to him, and it scared him. And then partly out of annoyance with him, partly out of need or hunger, partly out of self-protection, she eats him. But she isn't just, a straight up vampire shapeshifter. Like, she's some kind of psychic entity here. And she's able to be more than one person simultaneously. She can project Marissa while physically being John.
I don't know what exactly happened to Marissa, like corporeally.
Mm-hmm.
But when the entity shifted over to John, but there's a monologue that she gives in one of the reverse scenes where she says, as she was working on Two of Everything, she had originally come up with this part, but she as John here, who's running the show, had come up with this part for this other character, Amy. We'll talk about why that's interesting. But that she kept thinking about Marissa for this role. And so she brought her back.
She brought Marissa back. Yeah. And if you watch some of the scenes from the production of Two of Everything, and you get those scenes where you can overlay the actors on the, where it's like cutting into, there's an empty chair,
where Marissa would be. Yeah. And
I just watched one of those.
The one is taking John's
the one
place.
She's doing the scene, the voice of John. And of Marissa,
and although Shane, I should
Marissa.
say actually, like, yes, I believe you're right that like Marissa is a projection during some parts of Minsky. I believe she switches it when she gets when she starts in Two of Everything. When she brings Marissa back, I believe she's physically embodying Marissa and John as a projection based on the film. The clips I was saying, it's John's seat that's empty. In the clips, she's reading John's lines, but sitting where Marissa sits. That kind of stuff. So, and also like when we get to the end, like it's Marissa in the final scene, it's not John. So I believe that like John I think she can switch basically.
Okay. I was wondering about that because the one hole in that theory is not what happens to John, gobble gobble yum yum, but what happens
classic
to John,
gobble gobble yum yum.
Could have said it better myself.
But what happened to John during the production of in the 90s? So I think that makes sense. I think it's probably two of everything.
It's so funny to me just the difference in experiences too. And I think because again, I know I've said it a couple times, but that was the second secret scene I saw was Marissa eating John, and I've assumed that this game has some weighting about when it shows you certain clips. And so my thought was like, wow, you're going from like, oh, I'm sleuthing to this is like an insane murder mystery sort of thing right out of the gates. And then I find out from all of you that like, no, most of you, that was like way later.
Yeah, I think it took me 3 hours to even see a hidden scene, maybe 2. And I didn't see that specific one until way.
I think it's actually a credit to the game and makes me like it even more that like that's not a predefined like exposure, that you can.
Yeah.
We talked about this also with Her Story and Telling Lies, in that like both of them had that feeling of like, I felt for sure that I had walked some kind of perfect critical plot discovery path with Her Story, for example, like, and that I had been like led, in a very designed way through the discoveries that I made. And I don't think I was. There are things that the game does in setting up its systems that encourage you to find certain things earlier rather than later, just, in both of these cases, but nothing is out of bounds.
I started with Ambrosio partly because it was the first movie chronologically, partly because I thought like, this seems cool. I want to do this.
I started with it because it was the coolest looking one.
I know. I was like, this looks rad.
For sure.
Yeah, we have such different tastes. I was like, oh, this.
But I could see like you get, because you start off with the clip where you get multiple, like you can get into multiple movies very quickly. It takes like 3 clicks before you are collecting something from every movie. It's not like you unlock a movie at a time. So I think it is valid to get like the middle of the story first or the end of the story first.
The way I put it when we were talking about this in the first episode was like, you kind of absorb these stories, the stories of the 3 films, kind of as a gestalt. You're like taking them in bit by bit. And, I eventually sort of felt like, okay, I see it as a whole now. I didn't come to understand any of these stories beginning to end. It was just sort of like you begin to encompass them and start making them make sense in your head.
For my brain and knowing I wasn't probably going to hit credits, I was like, I'm going to know the whole plot of Ambrosia and find most of those clips. And I think I did. I mean, you can't find all of the clips without going at other movies.
I don't even know how you would go about trying to find all the scenes in a particular movie.
Well, there's certain things that it's like easiest to find. So like
I have some tips on that.
Every scene, every movie has its own unique crew members. So one trick was like
makeup
the prop
girl,
master
bam,
or makeup girl
bam.
or assistant directors are in almost every scene in every given movie starts with an assistant director coming in with a clapboard. And you go through those people. Also, certain movies have different visual languages. There's a ton of candles in Ambrosio. There's a ton of fruit and flowers. Those are in other
quite
movies
frankly
too, but
started the game by spending 10 minutes not watching any clips and just going clapboard to clapboard for like 10 minutes, just clicking on the clapboard. And then I got
you can't unlock everything by doing clapboards, but you can get a lot of clips very quickly if your goal is to just open
you can get a
things
lot
up.
of clips very quickly. And then I started going into the movies one at a time.
None of the behind the scenes stuff. The behind the scenes stuff is often the hardest stuff to find.
Yep.
It's the people in that. One of my favorite, I know this is just a little moment while I'm remembering it. One of my favorite little jumps. There's a scene with Andy Warhol in it.
Yes.
And he's only in one scene. So if you click on him, it will take you to a statue with a wig on it.
Yep.
Well, there's a woman in the diner that if you click on her face, it just goes and zooms you back into her face. It's
There's
like
actually quite a few of those. Yeah, a lot of side characters. I think if they only appear in one scene, it'll do that, which is just a nice way. The good news there is that it is adding them to the photo grid when that happens, and you do get their names. One of the things that you can do if you want to explore more is go to the photo grid and look for named people. Like the difference between someone with a name and the difference and another person who's like assistant director number 2 or whatever. Like there's going to be a lot more to dig through for the people with names.
But don't ignore those assistant directors and stuff too. They're still really useful.
I separated out I did this on Her Story too, and Telling Lies, which it's like I mentally separated out I'm just going to like turn my brain off and look for clips for 5 minutes. And then when I'm done with that, I will go watch everything I just got.
See, I think I played for 8 hours straight of a entire stream of consciousness. Like, I'm going to click on this thing now. Whoop,
and your brain is beautiful, Nate.
Whoop, but that said, I think I'm at the point now where I'm starting to see a lot of the clips that I've already seen, and I need to do these things that you all are outlining here to really get to this final stage of understanding, because clearly you need to think about it more than just like, that looks cool.
I wish there was you have thoroughly watched this clip.
Yeah. That's the thing that I was kind of I use the favorites kind of as a proxy for that, but I just favorited anything where I'd seen it and found something interesting in the secret scene. But it was hard. Like, I kind of wish there was a way for me to either take notes on a clip or to just add symbols or something to say, like, I've watched this before, or maybe just like a marker to show that you've watched it from beginning to end, that kind of thing. I found myself really wishing for that, especially when I got really late in the game, and I'd have to click through 15 clips before I'd find something new. That was tricky. So if I were doing this again from the start, I might have taken notes better. Like, for example, it wouldn't be that hard to keep a sheet that said, like, Ambrosio scene A, scene 1A, scene 2B, scene 1C, and just check them off or make a list as I was going. But I didn't, so whatever. So we're about to talk through the plots of each of the 3 films. We already talked a lot about the sort of hidden story of the game, and we'll talk about the endings way at the end. But Nate has to jump off. So Nate, it was good having you, and you can listen to the episode later.
I know. I am both a part of the show and a fan of the show. So sometimes this lines up where I can be educated even further about whatever it is the hell that we just played. So I'm actually kind of glad that I won't hear all of the real endings, because I intend to really keep playing through it. So yeah.
Yeah, this will be titrated, and I will drop in a bit, and then it will just be the
way it was always meant to be.
2 of everything,
as it's supposed to be in the Sam Barlow game.
Just
2 identical people talking.
Yeah,
about
wait till they find out that Laura and I have never existed.
Oh no! Well, Nate, you psychic vampire, you. I'll talk to you later, and we will continue by talking about the stories of the 3 films of Immortality, starting with Ambrosio. So Ambrosio was my favorite of the movies. I don't know about you guys, but of all 3, like, I found things to love in all of them, and all of them are pitch perfect versions of their things. But Ambrosio, we already talked about it in the first episode, but Ambrosio is a absolutely pitch perfect, like gothic late 70s exploitation, like sex and blood.
But it's all crucial to the plot.
Of course it is.
I love
of course
that.
It's all crucial to the
I
plot.
love that.
It's
This
so
is exactly the way that they talked about it in the behind the scenes was fantastic. They were really all in on the machismo filmmaking of wanting to put so much sex in this film.
Oh, so much sex in the film, but also they're doing a sex scene. It's like we're not going to see your tits too much. Like you need to angle, look at doggy style. Like they're trying to be very careful, but then they're also saying things like, "But it's always in service of the story."
It's that felt very true to a certain type of exploitation, and what made me laugh as I went along with it was that early on, I was sure that this was a story about the exploitation of Marissa Marcel. This is that
the whole game was?
Or perhaps, or at the very least, the early part of the story. I was sticking mostly to Ambrosio. I know this is a story about a 17-year-old actress who was plucked from a field of thousands by a clear Hitchcock analog who seems to also be obsessed with tits.
Or Gino is, but all of them.
They all are. And I thought this was going to be a story about like an Artur abusing a young woman. First of all, she couldn't be anything farther from a young woman. Some of the scenes where the director, what's his name? Arthur Fisher, is sort of chuckling to himself about this 17-year-old girl. Oh, you can't possibly know anything about that, my innocent young darling. You have to laugh when you see them, depending on where you are in Discovery, because this is a creature that is so much older than him. And
you don't get it. She just looks 17. She's actually 1,000 years old.
But
and
I mean,
it's
that's
the anime
that's
way to do
the
it.
The from what I gathered, the clever adaptation choice that the director has made of this 18th century novel is that the innocent character that gets seduced by the monk and dies is the same character as the devil Satan tempter. So he merged the two characters and was like, seduction of the innocent, how cool, I'll get this innocent girl and I'll just train her to be the sexy Satanist. Like he blends the role because it gives him a hard on and it happens to be what's happening.
I didn't get that about him blending the role. Which role was that something they said about the book?
He says like, I will take Rosario and turn it into like this other, like he talks about like taking Rosario and turning it into the devil worshiper. Like he says that in a clip. So I assumed completely on that one line, he's blending the two roles. There's
several scenes. And one thing I don't know that we've mentioned is how much I like the fact that a lot of the times when they do a scene, they'll alternate between the actual recorded scenes for the film and rehearsals, table reads, things like that. It's a really economical way to do these kinds of things. And it's a way to, show us the production at different stages while still showing things in order. A lot of the table reads that happen early on in Ambrosio have characters or actors or actresses finding out that maybe their favorite thing has been edited out. There's the actress who plays the mother of one of the victims of Ambrosio's I don't know. I don't even
appetites.
Yes. That mother character has walked out of one of these table reads and is being read instead by one of the assistant directors because she was incensed that her character was so much smaller than she was in the book. And it's little details like that I think really sell some of the behind the scenes drama.
And I really appreciate that you get to see things in a table read and a rehearsal and framed, filmed scene. And it, just like other Sam Barlow's, I also really enjoyed that a clip might just be a close up of an orange, or it might be a table, and you can start seeing in your mind how you might cut it into a film.
And sometimes those scenes, even though they are here's just some film of them doing some B-roll close up on a prop, sometimes become useful in the act of searching for something. So the first time I encountered a snake an image that becomes very useful in finding certain other scenes was just some B-roll footage where I forget, like, I think there's a lot of flowers in all of the movies, but there's a relatively small number of snakes. And there's a clip in Ambrosio where just a snake slithers past a flower. It's like, oh shit, a snake. And
so when he gets poisoned too. That's
one of my white whale clips was from one of my favorite back kind of behind the scenes or ancillary elements is these interviews, right? And there's a place where Marissa is being interviewed on a late night show where she is she introduces and then they cut to a clip from the film. And for a while, I thought that would be the only place I would find that clip from the film. And it seemed like a really pivotal scene because it's kind of a turning point for Ambrosio's character at being tempted by this young woman. And he's looking into a magic mirror. And I was digging through every mirror in all three of these flicks for a long time before I ultimately made my way back to this clip to see the full version of it. And I had given up. I figured, well, maybe they're just going to show it to us this one way. We only get this VHS version of some of these scenes, and that's kind of cool. But ultimately I did find it and got to see even more about it. And it had, of course, some great reverse footage. So I think it's very cool the way they kind of spread some of those around.
And you get to see what they see in the mirror, which is one of my favorite things that I found early on was seeing the shot of what he sees.
I actually didn't see that.
So you get you get a picture of the brunette in that film, the girl who plays like Angelina, the innocent.
We know. I knew who he was looking at. But.
So she's in a robe, and there's a bird hanging, and there's a bathtub, and then they're like, "Okay, chill for a second, take the robe off." And that's the mirror scene.
I misread that. And now I see exactly what you mean because they were in sequence. That was like 40A and 40E. But I thought that was a keyhole scene that we were seeing.
Well, no, you see him. Yeah. So you see him like in the smoke, and that's supposed to be him reflected in the mirror and then the smoke and then replaced by her. So like, I just loved all of that stuff. Like the pause where where she drops the book and they like come in and hang it and then it falls to the floor. Like all of those clips made me happy.
The bird never works right.
The bird doesn't work right. Yeah.
Man. So the overall plot of Ambrosio, tell me if I missed anything. Ambrosio, very holy man, a monk. He lives, he's never left his monastery.
The holiest man in Madrid.
Yeah. And he is, preaches constantly about purity and rejecting sin. And then into his life comes this woman who is who's disguised her gender and become a young initiate and tempts him again and again.
She didn't disguise her gender very well.
No, not really. She was
doesn't even try.
Still super hot, and tempt him into sin. They have a lot of very graphic on-screen sex, and then eventually she continues to tempt him into further depravities. And there's some specifics and details there, not all of which were entirely clear to me.
You have tiring of me as your mistress, but there are other delights.
Yeah, and she's encouraging him to do even more depraved things until he's up to the point of raping and then imprisoning women in a crypt underground
and murdering,
of course, murdering the mom and carrying off the daughter. And finally, he is arrested by the Inquisition and killed, and she escapes by making a deal with the devil. And then the devil in the form of Marissa comes to sort of gloat over him as he dies a slow death at the hands of the Inquisition. Did I miss anything there?
I think there's one piece that you missed there, which is kind of Ambrosio's first big sin. Ambrosio is kind of locally worshipped as the holiest man in Madrid, and that comes with being kind of fawned over by like the religious establishment, especially kind of in the body of this kind of Mother Superior nun, and I'm not quite sure what his position is, but he is asked to kind of sit in judgment over a nun who has become pregnant, and he has them imprison her in the crypt to starve to death, and I think he is also encouraged by Marissa's character, like. He said, like, doing this will kind of throw them off of your real sin of of having sex with me.
Totally reasonable.
Because if you're still coming down hard on unwed sex, then obviously no one will suspect you. So that was kind of the first big unforgivable sin for him, and then all of the rest was tragedy.
We also start to see some things in the behind the scenes stuff that starts throwing off my initial image of Marissa as essentially being taken advantage of. Not too far into the film, we see the beginnings of her relationship with John Durek, who's her director of photography on this film. The scene I'm most specifically thinking of, one of the first that I saw that included, look, I'll own it. The first time I saw boobs on this movie, I clicked on them and it took me to another scene with boobs, which took me to another scene with boobs. There's a lot of boobs in this. And so one of the first
Will you click away or will you continue to click and see how deep the rabbit hole goes?
How many boobies? Side note, I learned a really good dad joke today, which I'll already have spoiled the punchline to. What kind of bees make milk?
Boobies.
Boobies.
That's the worst, Reagan. Please edit that out.
So the scene I'm thinking of here is specifically she and John Durek set up a camera and have sex on the crypt set with John disguised as the actor playing Ambrosio. Presumably this is the first time that it's unclear from the angle and what's going on whether this is simulated or unsimulated sex.
John Durek, the cameraman. Yeah, in this one, the director and later.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Or not cameraman, but director of photography.
Yes,
he's the DP.
Well, behind the camera. So
yes,
many references to staring at John.
And that was like a moment where, like, well, she was the aggressor in that. Not only was she like the sexual aggressor with John, IRL, but she's also encouraging him to film additional nudity and put it into the film without asking Arthur Fisher, the director. She's clearly pushing this movie in a sexier and sexier direction, which is weird and surprising given my initial preconceptions about who Marissa was.
This ties very much to the monologue that I was referencing at the start, where Marissa says, I even kind of took a note on this one. Mm-hmm. She says, making a movie is about capturing the light that bounces off your skin and recording it on film, and then releasing it to the audience in the theaters. When you're sat in the theater and the light that hits your eye is part of this chemical chain that reaches back to and touches my skin. I think in that way, if we make more movies that show more of the body, it could be a powerful magic. She says this in a little behind the scenes interview
with two people standing on either side of her.
It breaks the tone a little bit. It's a very innocent interview where they are basically
both of her co-hosts are looking at her like whoa, these fucking hippies are looking at her like, whoa, she's too much. Like,
yeah, and this was the source of my like, oh, she's gonna sacrifice her soul to live in film forever. Yeah. Like this girl,
and it does tie into the ending, which we'll talk about later. But like, after I got the end of this movie, I thought back on that moment and thought like there is powerful magics at work here. Like it's light. Really cool. It's sort of a cool foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Anything else to say about Ambrosio? Oh, I guess one little aside would be like this is visually a super cool fucking movie. I loved the matte paintings. There are only a couple of them. That's probably an expensive thing to pull off, but they have these very old school like matte painting sets where they've got
crypt,
like
the cliff. There's a few others, I think.
The cliff. When I came to it, like my jaw was on the floor. Like you get that scene of the one walking out in the weird, creepy green magic dress with the Satan headpiece, looking like a creepy queen, walking out of nowhere because of the way that the set is built, walking out from behind a tree that she couldn't possibly fit behind, and then addressing the camera directly. And this like it's chills, man. That's a chilling and awesome scene.
So the first thing we get of this movie is Marissa introducing a late night show. So what? And then he's like, "Will we get to see this?" She's like, "I hope so." Never released.
So this is the one of the mysteries of the game is like, well, 3 movies, none of them were released. And the answer to why none of them were released is much clearer for the second and third movies than it is for the first. All I know for sure is that there is a clip later in the thing where the one talks about she, as John Durek, at some point later in her life, had Arthur Fisher come to her and bring her the negatives that he had stolen for Ambrosio. So, but we don't see, as far as I know, we don't see that theft or
No.
I guess absconding with his own work because it's his movie. My best guess is that at some point, Arthur Fisher felt that, perhaps rightly, that the movie had gotten away from him. And, we see Marissa starting to sort of work her magic on this movie and sort of pushing it in directions that the director might not have intended. But perhaps that happened to such a degree that Arthur Fisher decided not to release the movie and ran away with the negatives and never released them and only turned them over to John Durick, maybe on the verge of death.
He seems pretty happy during the rap party. Like he even calls Marissa up on stage.
Yeah, my theory is that the problem happened afterwards because they were essentially surreptitiously editing in a lot more racy content.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't have a lot to justify this theory, but maybe they had trouble with the ratings board or something that stopped the film's release, because there's essentially not a version of this film that is that is even rated R.
No.
They were forcing explicit sex into scenes that were not written with it. Like you could tell they were really working hard to make this the horniest version of itself.
They were adding sex into something that during a table read has a fuck montage.
Well, that's true.
But and then they added sex on top of that. So
I call it the fuck montage. I loved that.
So yeah, it's possible it was just that Fisher could never get this past the ratings boards in the 70s or didn't want to release it as an X-rated titty picture or something.
Sorry, Benedetta.
If anyone has a better answer for this specific question, I'd be very interested.
Yes, me too, because this is the best I could come up with. I don't know. We'll talk about why the other two films were not released when we get to them, and they're a much clearer picture of that.
So a couple of years go by. In the interim, we have that. I think this is a good time for us to talk about the interview scene, which has a lot of really good and specific hidden stuff in there. There's a I guess he's meant to be kind of a Johnny Carson type interviewing Marissa.
He had such a goofy, "Oh, you are in a movie. I hear this movie has a lot of nudity. They like that in Europe, don't they? The nudity."
He's hamming it up.
And she looks so uncomfortable, which also makes you think she's more innocent than she is.
But you get the rewind version of this, and it has just one of the scenes where it's a pure swap, where the interviewer is interviewing the entity. And we get, actually, this is another of those scenes where if you rewind multiple times, you're going to get different versions of it. You're essentially getting one really extended interview. We get a series of different interview clips. And the interviewer here is really acting as kind of an audience surrogate. This is the scene where I think a lot of people are going to have some of their basic questions about the metaphysics of these immortal creatures. He's asking questions like, can you be killed? And what is it like to be immortal and things like that. And I don't want to spoil the answers because they're excellent, but there's one quote that I really loved where she was basically describing. He basically asked, "Well, what are you?" And she basically describes the water cycle.
The best I can quote it would be, he asks, "Do you have babies?" And she responds, "We don't really reproduce in that way. We are like, you can think of us like the water that melts and flows down from the mountaintop and flows down through the streams and into the ocean and evaporates and falls again on the mountain as rain."
So when I said earlier that I had Marissa has gone into movies as Ghost, and then this is my first scene within a scene I found. Or first multiple layer scene I found, I think.
Same
and
here.
I was just like, oh yeah, my theory is totally bonkers because this is completely different. But it was lovely. This was how I wanted to get my thoughts. I think I had a perfectly valid theory until I started. At that point, I hadn't gone too deep. Too TWO deep. I'd only gone one deep. And so one deep, that was a valid theory. Too deep, nope.
Yeah, that was an incredible scene, and there are two scenes with that Johnny Carson figure. Another one happens after Minsky, so I guess we can talk about it then. And then there's a third late night host, but that one is diegetically inserted into the third movie, Two of Everything. And I wanted more out of that. I kept hunting through those because I kept expecting after two of them, like, oh, there's another late night host. Surely we're going to get another scene like that where somebody interviews the immortals. But we did not, as far as I could tell.
Do you get the late night host as one of the first clips, correct? This Minsky late night host, correct?
Well, the way that this works, obviously it's been a little while, but here's how I think that beginning of the game works is that, when you first boot up the game, it shows you a completely full clip grid with, I don't know if it's everything, but enough to fill your entire screen. And then you pick which clip you start on. And once you back out of that clip, it's the only clip.
This is the clip I started on, but at the time I didn't know.
That's great.
This is the clip I started on. At the time, I did not know about the backtracking. So this is the clip I started on, used it to get into Ambrosio, and then I abandoned it until almost the end of Ambrosio digging. And then I went back to it to be like, now that I know what's going on, what's in this clip? So the first time through, I didn't know about the slowdown mechanic or anything. So it was a really nice cap. But there was a potential, had I known about the rewinding at the beginning, there was a potential for me to figure this out like first clip of the game. How wild would that have been?
Yeah.
It's particularly interesting because that's the clip that is used pretty much as the trailer, like that interview.
That might be why I picked it.
Yeah, it does set you up as it sets you up with a lot of info about Marissa herself, even just on the first pass.
Yeah.
And
what better to introduce you to a movie than someone talking about the movie on a late night show?
That was my thought, but I was like, there's a lot going on here I don't understand. So I just assumed I didn't remember, but I assumed the game had kind of like suggested that clip to you. But I guess I picked it randomly.
Yeah, I picked something very different and I didn't encounter this until much later. So maybe now we should talk about Minsky, which if I had to say, like I said that Ambrosio is my favorite of these three movies. If you asked me at a different moment, it might have been Minsky. I think Minsky has a good script. I think it's a pretty well written movie. Like I like the dialogue in this one. The first movie has great visuals, but I think Minsky is a really interesting, well written 1970s cop thriller pastiche.
Before we hop into the plot of Minsky, I just want to say a quick thing on like a number of clips for completionists. So apparently there's 202 clips total, and there's 76 for Ambrosio and 69 for Minsky, and then fewer for Two of Everything. So like that actually feels right to me from playing. So just before we get into Minsky's, I thought it was funny that it had 69 clips for the
Nice.
Thank you, Laura, for bringing that to us now.
Continue. Someone please give a plot of this movie.
Feels appropriate.
Yep.
Shane, do you have the plot of Minsky ironed out or?
Sort of. Yeah. I don't know. If you wanted to take this, that'd be fine. I'll probably talk more on Two of Everything, but
okay.
I'll set it up.
Sure.
Minsky is it's set in New York, kind of against the pop art scene, and through a lot of the background, we see that the production is very much integrated into the kind of classic pop art scene. I think I mentioned that there's an Andy Warhol pseudo appearance here. Warhol would love to have been portrayed in this, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
But in this, there's the title character is Minsky, who's an artist who is murdered, and this is a murder investigation. And the main characters, I should say, are Carl, who is a very handsome man who is playing the cop, and Marissa's character, whose name I can't remember. Oh, Franny, yep, who is a muse to, I guess maybe this is where our talk about muses is coming in. She is the muse to Minsky, and is the prime suspect.
Mm-hmm. This is something where like I drawing connections between the movies, and also maybe why muses were partially on my brain here. In the first and second movies, Marissa's character is the original of a painting that's featured prominently. More so in this one, but like it's a big plot point in Ambrosio that Marissa's character is the original of the Madonna, the painting of the Virgin Mary that perhaps the sort of original sin of the monk Ambrosio is that he has a fixation on this Mary that verges on sexual. And then when this character appears and it turns out she is the original of the painting, she posed for it. And actually it's implied, I think later, not to go back to Ambrosio, but it's implied, I think later that she was actually sent by Satan and designed specifically for Ambrosio to tempt him, that perhaps that she was designed after the painting rather than the reverse.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it is the Marissa cinematic universe, the other MCU.
Yeah. So, story of Minsky, Minsky, the artist, is killed in the first scene. He is played by John Durick after the original actor who was playing him walks out, and
in a very funny scene.
Very, he's portrayed as kind of an old fuddy-duddy, but when he walks out, he's rebelling against weird and creepy working conditions that frankly are weird and creepy. Like the relationship,
in a papier-mâché mask with straws up his nose, naked on the floor, and he keeps getting told to lay there, and he's like, "I've been here for hours."
Yeah. And more than that, he's also just like rebelling against the sort of the level of sexuality of the film. They're telling him he needs to take off his underwear and everything.
Oh yeah, because he wants to take the nude underwear off because it's not showing, and he's like, "You've had too many scenes. I'm not taking my underwear off. I'm leaving."
Yeah, they're not going to be looking at me. They're going to be looking at Marissa gyrating up there.
No, bop it around on top of me or something like that.
So after that, the director, John Durick, decides to play the deceased artist. And the main plot is that this cop, this very sexy cop played by Carl Greenwood, the cop's name is Goodman. I forget his first name. In fact, I'm not sure it even says his first name. Goodman is slowly investigating. The obvious suspect is the girlfriend of the deceased, Franny. She's less girlfriend than sort of like abused muse, like we said. But he's slowly falling for her and falling in love with or being entranced by the like strange sexually liberated artist scene that she inhabits. And that's sort of leading him astray because, as of course it turns out, she really did kill Minsky.
Like in all good noirs.
Yes, of course. And that leaves him, well, what does he do? He's in too deep. And the end of the film, Franny has moved on and become an artist in her own right and is giving gallery shows. And Detective Goodman has quit homicide detectiving and moved on to white collar crimes. And there's other angles to it too. There's this sort of reversal that happens in the middle of the film where we discover that Goodman actually was rich and an art collector and owns one of Minsky's portraits of Marissa from before any of the action of the film took place. And so there's an expectation that he's actually like obsessed with her in a way that he wasn't upfront about, and vice versa. She's holding back from him that she actually was the killer of Minsky.
There's also an entire element of his character where kind of she takes him on a psychosexual journey, and he dresses in women's clothes and they go out to clubs together and are discovered by, I believe, one of his lovers, something like that.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
they're chasing. I forget who. I don't know who that person in the bathroom was. It might have been, but they're chasing after a lead that turns out to be false, and the woman that they basically frame for the crime kills herself in jail. I would say like this is not a complete movie. Part of the story of this is that Ambrosio was never released, but this movie was never completed. And so there's definitely holes in our understanding of the story here, but the scenes that we do get, I think, are really well written. Like to the point where there were scenes in this that I was like watching and rapt attention. Like that Ambrosio had this sort of overacted style to it. It was very heightened. It was very stylized. This felt more like a movie to me, or not like a movie, but like Like this felt very modern in its acting and writing to me, or at least as modern as a 70s movie. Naturalistic is the word I was looking for.
I also think that this movie has some of the most pivotal hidden scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And the most obvious one is the death of Carl Greenwood.
Mm-hmm.
But the kind of better hidden story here is if you view if you're really looking for these hidden scenes and the story that they tell, the best thing to do is to see things in chronological order. So if you look at this film in chronological order, the very last scene filmed, of course, is the death of Carl Greenwood. But just before that is a scene that is the revelation of Carl Greenwood's character, that he had been this art collector, rich kid, kind of his and revealing his kind of obsession with Franny that had been driving this. And simultaneous to that, we have the revelation that Carl Greenwood has been occupied by the other one. And we pretty quickly right after that get the scene that I believe we mentioned earlier, where Marissa is kind of crying to John, saying he's not who you think he is. And this is, I think, one of those kind of moments of the abusive relationship that these two creatures have to each other. Like any time she is building a relationship with a human, which she was with Carl Greenwood, obviously they had a really powerful attraction, her and Carl. He intervenes to kind of stop that, and he's done so here by kind of taking over Carl's body and redirecting her attention back to him. And so that's when we get this very. Now I definitely have some kind of questions around this scene with Carl. Like the real scene, in as it's played forward.
Mm-hmm.
Marissa is in a pork pie hat and like a fake mustache, and I don't know why.
So
and he's calling her Frankie Salvatore or something like that.
There's a scene earlier in the movie where Goodman is grilling, and I think that scene is only seen in the form of a rehearsal, where Goodman is grilling her about that name, asking like, who is this? And I believe it's because Minsky had a diary entry about the day that he was about to be murdered that mentioned this Frankie person. And no one seems to know who he is. And that was one of the inciting incidents of like him investigating the like artist scene of, So, but I don't know, why is Marissa's character dressed that way? So I don't know.
I think there's an element here. There's like a layer to this film that maybe wasn't fully explored in the bits that we did see that were recorded, or maybe that I found, of this sort of gender reversal element where, Carl's character is wearing high heels and earrings, and Franny is dressing up in men's clothing. I feel like there's something missing there. It feels like there's a loose end. But there's going to be a lot of loose ends when you have a scene that where the
prop gun was loaded.
The prop gun was loaded. I mean, this is the Crow. This is Rust. There's plenty of times in the history of filmmaking where a prop gun has malfunctioned and someone's been shot and killed. And Brandon Lee, we lost him that way. R.I.P.
Yep.
So in the reversal of that film, or of that clip, you see like him challenging her to shoot him.
Yeah.
And so and what we don't see is her cremating him. It says at some point that happens, but we know from the interview with the Johnny Carson character that the only way that they can really die is if their bodies are burned. And then she has him cremated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and she says that in a reverse scene later, and there's the reverse version of this scene has them kind of squaring off in what is one of the most dramatically lit scenes of the entire film. Like there's this kind of beautiful side lighting, and he's telling her it's us or them. And, you know, and he's telling her, like, you chose them, I choose me. You know, this is him trying to intervene in her building a relationship with humanity. And, you know, she basically tells her to shoot him. But one of the interesting things that he says in that I keep thinking back about is he says, you never watched me die before. And I just don't know what that represents to them.
Well, when we talk about the ending, we can talk a little bit about what it means to watch one of these creatures die. Yep. But yeah, I was also a little puzzled by that. I'm not sure exactly what that means in this context.
But especially considering, I think at another point, I also seem to remember them saying this isn't the only time they've killed each other. So how could that be? I feel like there's something I don't know.
Yeah. I'm also not sure, like maybe she just has, you know, not seen the act, like maybe she walked away, you know, that kind of thing. But so it might not be that like fraught with meaning as it potentially sounds. I think we kind of know a lot about what's going on here, but there's definitely still some holes. Anything else to say about Minsky other than why it was never released? It's super obvious. Like Carl it appears to be killed during the filming of the movie. And so, of course, you're not going to release that movie.
Yep.
But afterwards, Marissa is now John, and or rather, the one is now John, and goes on to spend the next 20 years creating films and being a hot in-demand director. It's kind of implied that he's like a Spielberg-y kind of character.
There is a reverse scene in Minsky where we see John lying dead on the floor, or dying, I should say, on the floor. And Marissa behind the camera, or I guess the one behind the camera is watching him bleed out. She has torn out his throat is what it looks like. And
which we see always when they like eat somebody, basically. They don't like seem to be the kind of vampire that sits there drinking blood for a while. They basically take a single bite and then ... and then suddenly they're that person.
And we'll say that the creators of this do not necessarily endorse the word vampire. We are using it as shorthand.
It's inescapable.
It is inescapable, but we need to say like it's not
it's true.
It's not a term they enjoy.
Yeah, in some of the marketing or some of the review content that they sent out, say the press kit, they said we have avoided using the V word. I think primarily they're really asking you to kind of take a step back and consider what's being shown here and how it's different from a Dracula. But I agree, this is highly non-Dracula behavior. So she's kind of walking around as he's bleeding out, and there's something that's very specific here. I think she started to eat him in this scene, and what she's saying is he's less than I wanted him to be. Right? He wasn't who I wanted him to be. He wasn't as creative and as brilliant as I wanted him to be. And what I'm reminded of is another of kind of these reverse scenes where she's describing how she kind of consumed the peasant girl that really came to America as Marissa, and how, you know, when she did that, she really learned everything there was to know about that person, right? And so that's what makes that interesting to me, is she kind of fell in love with this human and idolized him. And I mean, she's really this whole sequence, this whole story is a story of her artistic journey as much as anything. And so she has come to idolize him, and so much that she has kind of become him, and she felt like it was a letdown. And that now she spends the next 20 years trying to become the artist that she wanted him to have been. And I think that was very interesting.
That is really cool. And then let's talk about Two of Everything. Shane, do you want to set up the plot of Two of Everything? This was probably the movie that I spent I had the hardest time kind of wrapping my head around the story of.
I'm still kind of digging on Two of Everything a little bit, but the basic plot of Two of Everything is it's about a pop star named Maria, I think.
Yep.
And she is the kind of the most, she's a incredibly famous, powerful, popular pop star. And she works with a body double that no one can tell apart from her.
I've seen multiple Disney movies about this.
Yeah,
I know.
So, this woman can sing like her, looks like her, can do all of her dances, and et cetera, et cetera. The story really begins with the pop star. They're carrying on this subterfuge. They don't tell people when they've switched places. It's the classic kind of twin plot line.
Shane and I know this very well.
Yeah, we used to do this all the time. So there's a scene early on where it's kind of at her trailer, right? And kind of coming off stage, the double realizes, there's a scene coming up, something like that. They're going to ask me to swim. I can't swim. So she has to call the real Marissa and get her to come and bail her out from this scene. And, to do that, she makes a big stink about, the apples here, they're not round enough. Bring me rounder apples. And this is just to buy time so that the real Marissa can come. Well, shortly after that, the agent arrives and invites Marissa to make some money by singing at a billionaire's birthday party. And the billionaire, I forget their names. Do you remember the names?
Hessenberg.
The Hessenberg.
I don't remember the first names.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Right. Mr. and Mrs. Hessenberg. So it's a lot of money.
$10 million.
Yeah. When you are, the world's most popular pop star who has an identical double, sure, send the double, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I forget the exact details, but it's that same kind of switcheroo plot where she does end up going. I think she was going to send the double, but then goes herself. I forget the
No, the double goes.
No, the double doesn't go. The double is the one that.
No, I guarantee you the double goes.
So
Heather.
this is because this is this kind of film that we're now approaching from multiple
out of order,
literally shuffling through scenes in which the same actress is portraying two different characters. This is probably the hardest film to really piece together. But so the double goes, and is she the one that is assaulted by the Hessenberg?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So she sings, she does the whole performance. And at the end of the night,
I'm not totally sure that that's the case. I think it might be the reverse, because at the end of the night,
I've seen scenes that come from the end of the movie where specifically Maria is still alive, but is basically stuck as Heather.
And then she says,
double.
"But it's me."
And
that's right. Okay.
She tries with some people. Originally, she tries to correct this, but she eventually decides that she's going to continue living as her body double, who's still alive, and let Maria be dead. But yeah, it's definitely Heather that goes on the trip.
And then goes on to get revenge and murder the people who murdered her. So, I mean, this is a great plot.
It's very David Lynch in the shooting style. It's a love letter to Mulholland Drive.
Yeah,
that's a good connection. Yeah, I wasn't quite sure where to place it, but that's probably pretty close. It has it's sort of splitting the difference between Mulholland Drive and a Disney Channel special about pop stars.
Yeah, there's a lot of bad wigs in Two of Everything.
This is maybe my biggest complaint about the entire thing, and the problem is that there's no solving it. The wig tech just isn't there for this, and I wasn't sure quite how much of that was supposed to be we're seeing Marissa.
I don't think the wig tech's supposed to be there. Again, if it's Mulholland Drive, the wig tech is not there in Mulholland Drive either.
Yeah,
and there, wigs are part of that movie. When Maria is pretending to be not Maria, basically, she wears a black bob wig. Maria's quote unquote real hair is supposed to be the long sort of honey hair. And I think that Heather the body double, is supposed to have real hair, but it's really clear it's a wig. So I'm not sure whose hair is supposed to be what's supposed to be a wig, what isn't necessarily supposed to be a wig. But wigs are definitely in play. I'm not really sure whether I'm supposed to look at this and say, that's her hair, or bad wig. But it's a bad wig.
No, it does sort of blend together. The behind the scenes on this and the in front of the scenes are kind of overlapping a little bit. And there's a few reasons for that. One is that there are a lot of scenes that aren't successfully filmed. Like they'll start off with the version of that seems to be going to tape. And then they'll have to cut because one or the other of the actors will collapse.
Yeah.
Like there's quite a few scenes in which Marissa has collapsed. And we've already mentioned this, but Marissa is the star here. But it's obviously Marissa should be like in her 40s here, I think.
So if she was 17 in 1968, what does that make her in 1999?
So that is 31 years older. So she's 48.
Yeah. And she doesn't look 48.
Yeah, she definitely doesn't. So obviously there's going to be something going on behind the scenes.
But things are continuing to get weirder and weirder. Like, yeah, like you mentioned that they have to keep stopping shooting. The place where that really like became really obvious for me was the scene where she's at the bar and she gets up, she picks up a card. She's like, I have to go like investigate this. And then suddenly she freezes and blood begins to run from her hairline down her face in just like a river of blood, just like running down her face.
Yeah. There's another scene that's, a similar thing happens where, both she and John, who's behind the camera, simultaneously collapse.
And that was the first one I found in this group.
Like she, the one who is at this time both Marissa and John, is a machine that is breaking down. Like you get this feeling that like things are going wrong with her ability to like hold this shape.
Artistically, things are going wrong for her as well. I mean, there's a point where she's talking about Two of Everything. Remember that she is John, who is the director, and at several points in the behind the scenes, you hear that she's financing this, or herself. They are financing this themselves. Himself.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an independent production. It has the look of a 90s independent production.
It does. It looks like it's shot on DV tape or something.
Yeah. I mean, maybe if you're Immortal, maybe you could get enough of a budget together to put into this. I don't know. But it's also worth mentioning that there's a lot more use of the kind of pre-production recording here. Mm-hmm. Like we see this thing in a much less finished state. It's also kind of the stated intent of the one here, the entity, to use this film as a way to tell her story in a coded way. And that's the part that's keeping me trying to come back to Two of Everything, because I'm trying to see the one's story in the story of Two of Everything. And I wonder if anyone has any thoughts on that, because it is, it's hard to really find that for me.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
My impression is that, besides the like doubling mechanic of like being there and not there, there's also the like, when is it you and when is it the alternate? Because it's two people sharing a life. Like it's, in this case, it's two separate physical entities sharing one life. And I feel like the blending is what's interesting to her. Is like, when a bad thing happens to my alternate, does it affect me, the long-term person? Like I see something there. It's not as, I haven't gotten enough clips to know exactly, but I can see why inherently like two bodies, one life is an interesting concept for this.
And for me, I'm reading into the other one as the kind of the Maria is like a powerful artist with a global reach,
right?
But she is overpowered by this other one that is on another level from her. and is abused in that way. And I think there's a connection there.
Yeah, that she can't control what happens to the alternate version of herself. Like that, the alternate version of herself is set up for abuse, even though they share so much in common. I can see something there.
Yeah. But she has this secret power, which is that there are two of her, and so she comes back in another form and gets revenge.
Yes, being able to body swap, basically.
Yeah. So I kind of see it, but it's definitely not a direct, like, it's not like she went out and made like a vampire movie or something. It's not very direct. But also it's very interesting to see how the other one appears in this film, because so we are to understand that at the end of Minsky, that movie went off the rails when, Carl Greenwood got eaten by the other one, and sort of as revenge for that, the one kills him and burns his body permanently, compromising him to a permanent end. But that doesn't seem to have taken. And at some point, Marissa,
specifically, there's a reverse scene where we see him come back, and you see the two of them. Yeah. Well, I think it's as close as we get to him coming back. We see the two of them in a like embracing in the water, and she is asking him how he came back, and he says that Amy did it. And that ties to the Carl Greenwood death scene. If you watch that, this is one of those double reverse scenes. We see Amy, who is a co-star on Two of Everything, watching the footage of Carl Greenwood being killed in a movie theater. I'm presuming that she got her hands on that footage somehow. I'm not totally clear on how or why she would have watched it. But when she did, she turns and she addresses the camera and basically discloses that there was some magic here whereby watching him die on the screen transferred this being into her.
Mm-hmm. And that's the wild thing here, is that, like, if they can transcend even that, and they don't have to bite your neck to become you just have to see something on film, then that opens up what becomes the ending of this film. So my read on all of this is she killed him, she got her revenge, but she's not that mad to see him come back. They have a kind of a reconciliation here, is my read on it. Mm-hmm. And that he's essentially bringing her good news about their state of being, that she can do this same thing that he did.
I'm reminded of the scene in Two of Everything where they're doing kind of an effects shoot, which, by the way, this is hilarious to me given the history of Sam Barlow being like originally a director of like mocap. Mm-hmm. So there's like I think he did like mocap on like Legend of Kane or something like that.
No, it was. I think it's the movie the game he's most famous for was one of the. It's a Silent Hill Shattered Memories.
Okay. Well, I know he did something on Legend of Kane. I feel
did he?
I remember. Yeah.
Okay, maybe I don't remember that.
Maybe head to the Wikipedia page. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not sure. But he
had a whole AAA career before doing any of the games that he's known for now.
Yeah. There's a scene in Two of Everything where Maria is kind of dancing in a mocap suit after complaining about how silly she looks covered in ping pong balls. And the kind of production assistant kind of character in this has a moment where he's like monologuing. They're like watching the mocap playback, and he says something along the lines of
you're right.
Nobody can copy that. That's you. That, we've captured your essence on film. Right.
Yeah, by which he means the awkward,
your core being, he says, dancing
of your core being is this 90s CGI skeleton dance.
Yeah. And they're using that, and he's using that, her core being, her essence caught in mocap, to on the screen double and triple her, right?
You are so right.
So,
yeah, I didn't put this thematically together.
this is what I think is really going on in the ending, is that by record. So we haven't talked about that final scene with Amy and Marissa, but I will.
Should I drop for that, or am I already too far behind the curtain?
I think you may be already.
I
too
figured,
far.
yeah. Go
this
ahead.
is far beyond the rabbit.
Yeah,
down
I
the
didn't.
rabbit hole.
I found this scene kind of midway, though, actually. So, but the last scene chronologically in, I believe, the whole game is back in this same volume. This blacked out recording space. We see Amy, who we now know is the other one, and Marissa. Marissa sits down in a chair, and Amy douses her in gasoline and burns her. And it's horrible to watch. You watch her disintegrate into ash. And
you watch her body fall apart. It's really something.
And the light from her skin through an unbroken chemical process touches your eyes, right? And
just yeah, exactly. Just like Amy watched Carl Greenwood's death. Now we, the player, are the one watching the death of Marissa.
And as we watch this in reverse, we see their true forms. And she is dressed in the flowing, radiant gown that we see her in so many scenes.
The green one?
The gossamer transparent.
Oh, the transparent one.
Yeah.
It's actually more like flesh toned.
Mm-hmm.
We've never seen it in color before.
Yeah. So this is the only time we see her in color. So that's why I think that when we're seeing those monologues of hers, those are her projecting from this moment into all of this other footage.
Yeah,
that she has.
those are like the mental download that we're receiving.
Yeah, those are all her telling us her story, right? And that's the one thing all of those clips have in common. So,
which also explains why it's always in this blacked out void, because they're filming that scene in that sort of blacked out void.
And so when she burns, now you see that there's a reverse scene where she's like really staring you down through the barrel of the camera. And then when you come back to the main menu, the final thing that we get is her kind of breaking through that main menu and appearing to
the film clip grid.
Yeah, through the film clip grid. Essentially, I forget. I wish I remembered exactly what it was she said, but it was essentially, you're me now.
Yeah.
And so I see this as not just her finding a way to continue, but finding a way for her to multiply by digitizing her essence and turning it into software that everyone can download and enjoy off of Steam.
Yes. This is why when Nate earlier was sort of chuckling about like, well, in the metafiction of this, why would Half Mermaid receive all of this weird footage? And if they spent 10 minutes with it, they'd know there was something wrong here and just put it out as is. Mm-hmm. Well, they're doing it because that's the whole goal is to allow the one to multiply her essence or something. Yeah. That's I think you're absolutely right about it, and all the particulars there is Shane, and you had some points there that I hadn't picked up on, so that's really cool.
It's a real The Ring situation.
Oh yeah.
Listeners, I wish you could see Reagan's face. He has his jaw dropped and is just like, I think all these puzzle pieces in his mind are sifting into a new order. It is a joy to watch that you cannot see, because podcasting is not a visual medium. But trust me, Reagan looks gobsmacked and it's great.
I've had this face on through a good long chunk of Immortality. Yes. This is a game that gobsmacked me over and over and over again with discoveries. And I think we kind of have to leave it here for two reasons. One is that I don't have anything left to say, and the other is that we've been recording for 2 hours, and if we do any more, I will die because I will not be able to edit this thing. I'm really looking forward to talking more about this game, though. I really think there are things that, like, I'm still struggling to find those last remaining clips There are achievements in this game for collecting all of the clips in each of the 3 movies, and a final achievement for collecting everything. And I haven't gotten any of those achievements yet, even though I have been pouring my way through this for something like 16 hours. So I don't know, listeners, if you have any tips, let me know. I'm looking forward to hearing them. I
think it's worth mentioning. I don't think this game is designed for you to find everything. I think it's made, and I think it's specifically for the reason of conversations like this, where you can share what you saw and with someone else who enjoyed it, and hear what they saw that was different, and spark a really interesting discussion. I hit the credits on this game quite a while before I unlocked everything. I had seen very little of 2 of everything. I had seen really not that much, but I had seen the answers to what are kind of the stated mysteries of this, which is what happened to John, Carl, Marissa, maybe a couple of other people, right? And when I completed the game, I had a kind of very different theory about what I had just seen. I thought I understood the ending, but it took me going back and watching more to have a different theory. I really like the ending that we got, but the ending that I was imagining was a little different. I really thought that that I had kind of come to the idea that maybe the whole thing was a suicide note from this entity. And in a way it kind of is, but it's not. That's not really the whole story. I mean, it's really a much more kind of creepy and calculated thing that I think she's doing.
How do you have babies?
Yeah, exactly.
Early on.
Yeah, do you have babies? Asks Johnny Carson. Not like that. We flow like water. So yeah, it's for me. This has been a real pleasure. I really hope that we see more from Sam Barlow. This is without a doubt the best Sam Barlow game. This is and
it's worth noting, like this is his largest production in terms of team too. So like while this has got this sort of Artur vibe on the marketing of like this is a Sam Barlow game, it's the second game by Half Mermaid, which is his company that he started after the success of Her Story. He worked with additional writers. If you watch the credits, I forget their names, which is making me wish I had gone and taken notes on the credits. But he worked with screenwriters on this, so he didn't write all of these film scripts himself. He worked with a massive cast of excellent talent. I was super impressed by the acting in all of these. Challenging performances. Can you imagine playing the part of an ancient entity in the body of a young girl, playing a series of increasingly bizarre roles? There's so many layers that you have to stack in order to make this performance work. And I thought that the woman who played Marissa did a phenomenal job. I thought the guy who played Carl Greenwood was especially good. I thought he just really read as like he was perfect. Like, I don't know, any other, what did you guys think of like the production and performances before we finally leave this?
I really enjoyed it. I think I love that everybody got to play multiple characters in a way. Because even if you were playing a character that was like Ambrosio, you got to play the actor playing that person. And I think exactly. The things I really enjoyed about it were like the cut, and when people like what people did after cut was yelled or before was really entertaining to me. So I think honestly, I would probably watch most of these movies if they weren't in a game and they were together and complete.
Honestly, I would sit down and watch the YouTube cut of this where somebody just put, and I think that already exists for some of these, where somebody just puts all of them together in film order and makes a movie that you can watch. I would still watch that movie, even, despite the fact that half of the scenes would be in the form of table reads or
yeah. I'm very glad Sam Barlow, for some reason, is making it so much harder for himself to make movies. It's doing it in this format because it's what I like.
It's incredible. For me, the whole thing has this this tone, this theme of being about the artistic and creative process and about like creativity, and that if you were to strip out all of the supernatural elements of this, I think it would still be phenomenal because as a way of exploring the creative process of filmmaking, and for this, like seeing that struggle then kind of mirrored in the supernatural and horror elements, and finally seeing the kind of creative idea, what I think is the creative process that she's doing in her kind of self-annihilation at the end is very, very cool. I'm very, very excited to see other people's reactions to this and talk more about it. It's been a real pleasure.
Absolutely. And I guess we got to leave it there. Thank you so much for listening to The Short Game. You can find our show on the internet at www.theshortgame.net. You can find us on Patreon. We really appreciate our patrons. Thank you, patrons. And you can find our Patreon at patreon.com/theshortgame, where you can support us. And every one of our supporters gets access to our Discord, where we have an Immortality channel going. We are making... now that you have listened to this episode, you don't need to worry about the spoiler tags. Come on in and tell us what you thought.
But please spoiler tag for everyone else.
Yes, please do. And let's see. You can find us on Twitter at _shortgame. And you can find me on Twitter at RayganK. That's RayGanK. Laura, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Laura J. Nash.
And Shane, where can people find you?
Over on Twitter at 8BitShane.
And Nate had to jump off earlier, but he is at NateSTL. And thank you once again for joining us for this extra long, extra spoilery episode of The Short Game.
I like how this is tagged on Steam. It's Steam categorizes everything and with the tags. This is categorized as a hidden object, choose your own adventure noir.
Oh no.